All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving deep into one of the most pivotal and frankly one of the wildest chapters in the entire Bible, Daniel chapter 7. And this isn't just some old story. We're talking about a vision so powerful, it left the guy who saw it completely horrified.
So, picture this. Daniel, he's the guy kings have on speed dial to figure out their most messed up dreams. But then, in chapter 7, he has a vision of his own, and it totally rocks him. This chapter is the absolute hinge of the whole book. It's where everything shifts from history to this crazy symbolic vision. So the question is, what could he possibly have seen that shook him so badly?
So to really get why Daniel was so freaked out, we've got to get our hands on the right decoder ring, so to speak. He's not just writing down history here. He's using a style that can seem totally bizarre to us, but it was designed to send a really powerful message.
You see, Daniel 7 is where the book takes a hard right turn into something scholars call apocalyptic literature. And this isn't just storytelling. Think of it like this. It's a genre meant to give hope to people who are really suffering by basically pulling back the curtain on the universe to show that behind all the chaos on Earth, there's a divine plan at work.
And you gotta understand, this apocalyptic style, it's not your standard prophecy. Prophecy is often like, hey, repent, change your ways, and you can change the future. But apocalyptic visions, they're a bit different. They're more like, look, history is on a set path. Your job isn't to change it, it's to hang on, because the end of the story is already written, and it's a good one.
Okay, so with that in our back pocket, let's jump into the vision itself. Daniel sees these beasts coming out of a chaotic, stormy sea, which, by the way, in the ancient world is always a symbol for chaos and danger. Nothing good ever crawls out of the stormy sea.
So first up, this thing comes out. It's a lion with eagle's wings. Talk about a symbol of power and speed, right? A lot of people connect this with the Babylonian Empire. But then, boom, it gets humbled. Its wings are ripped right off, and it's forced to stand up on 2 feet like a person. This terrifying powerhouse is brought right down to earth.
Then comes beast number 2, a bear, but it's all lopsided and looks just hungry. Many see this as the Medo-Persian Empire. It's already got 3 ribs dangling from its mouth, and then a voice booms, "Get up, eat your fill." I mean, it is a chilling image of just brutal, non-stop conquest.
And after that, things get even weirder. A leopard shows up, but this isn't any leopard you'd see on a nature show. It's got 4 wings for super speed and 4 heads, which lots of folks connect to the 4 generals who split Alexander the Great's kingdom. And notice that key phrase, its dominion was given to it. Someone else, someone higher up, is pulling the strings here.
But then, the 4th beast. This one is on another level. It's so horrifying, Daniel doesn't even have an animal to compare it to. This is almost universally seen as the Roman Empire. He just says it's terrifying and dreadful, with these huge iron teeth for just crushing everything in its path. And as if that's not enough, this arrogant little horn sprouts from its head and starts spouting blasphemy against God himself. This is like peak earthly rebellion.
Okay, so just when the chaos on Earth hits this absolute fever pitch, the whole scene just pivots. The camera, if you will, pans up, away from the dark and stormy sea and into a completely different setting, a place of total order and divine authority.
And just like that, we are in a heavenly courtroom. You've got thrones being set up, and the Ancient of Days, that's God, takes his seat on a throne of fire. It's this incredible reminder that no matter how insane things get down on Earth, up here, court is in session.
And this is the whole point. While these nightmare-fueled beasts are running wild on Earth, their power has an expiration date. They are all going to face a final divine verdict. This chaos has a leash on it, and judgment is absolutely coming.
So, the court is set, judgment is about to be handed down, and that's when the hero of the vision makes his entrance. And what happens next is maybe the most mind-blowing part of the whole chapter, something that's going to echo for centuries all the way into the New Testament.
So first, let's be clear on who's in charge. We've got the Ancient of Days, God himself on the throne, the supreme judge, ultimate authority, check.
But then, another figure shows up. And you have to catch this detail. It's huge. In the ancient world, riding the clouds was something only the top god did. For other nations, it was Baal. But in the Old Testament, Yahweh is the cloud rider. So what Daniel sees here is just staggering. He sees 2 separate, divine figures, both acting with the authority of Yahweh in the same vision. And this Son of Man who's riding the clouds, he's not just some high-ranking angel. He goes right up to the throne of the Ancient of Days and is given an eternal kingdom. This shows they share divine authority.
For a second, Daniel is seeing two divine powers in heaven, both acting as God. I mean, can you imagine? It is an absolutely stunning theological vision.
So, what in the world does this all mean for Daniel and his people? And more importantly, why was he so freaked out by what seems like a happy ending? Well, the angel who explains it to him boils it all down to one key message.
Turns out, the big win isn't just for the Son of Man. The angel reveals that his eternal kingdom is actually shared with God's people, the holy ones, the very same people who've been suffering under those monstrous beasts. This is the ultimate promise. They get to share in the inheritance.
And that brings us right back to where we started. Why was Daniel so alarmed? Well, think about it. He's in exile, he's hoping his people can go home soon. But this vision just showed him that, yeah, there's a glorious eternal kingdom coming, but first, his people have to go through the meat grinder again. They have to face even more intense suffering from monsters like that arrogant little horn. The hope was absolutely real, but so was the coming pain.
You know, in the end, Daniel 7 isn't some simple timeline of future events you can just map out. It's a powerful word of encouragement, a reminder that the struggles we face on Earth are just one part of a huge cosmic battle. But it's also a rock-solid promise that the final outcome, the victory of God's eternal kingdom, a kingdom he shares with his people, is completely secure. And maybe that's the real question the vision leaves us with. If you know for sure how the story ends, how does that change the way you fight the battles you're in today?